It is my privilege to introduce the President of the Board of Directors for the Military Women in Need MWIN organization, Meredith Brenalvirez. Meredith is a CMC alumna, graduating in 1980, deemed a pioneer by the college that had recently gone co-ed in 1976. Meredith has continued to serve as a pioneer throughout her career and in all she does. As the president of the board of directors of MWIN, the leading nonprofit for women veterans in California, she has played an integral role in the growth of the organization from a small housing facility to a nationally recognized nonprofit. Through Meredith's leadership, MWIN's ecosystem has grown dramatically, offering female veterans and their families housing assistance, emergency subsidies, resource and referral services, and home visits. Meredith has been instrumental in the organizational growth, identifying the veterans she has met and worked with over the years as her inspiration, embodying the ideals of self-sacrifice, resilience, dignity, and duty to country. Prior to joining MWIN, Meredith worked in an advertising firm on Madison Avenue in New York for her first 5 years post-graduation from CMC. Choosing then to return back to California for a career in commercial real estate. Meredith migrated to the important nonprofit work and community leadership as her family grew. In addition to her tireless work with MWIN, Meredith serves on the Kravis Leadership Institute board and the Kravis Day Roulet Conference Planning Committee, has remained active with the Women in Leadership Alliance and the CMC Pioneer Project. Meredith's enthusiasm and connection to her work with MWIN has been a true inspiration. I am proud and excited to welcome Meredith up to the podium to celebrate our women veterans and our veterans just overall. Please, Meredith.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first thing I'd like to do, actually, is recognize all the veterans in the room. I was wondering if you are a veteran. Would you please stand up? Thank you. Thank you all so very much for your service and for reminding us the history of this country. Someone asked me, how did I ever get to MWIN? Well, unlike Brian, who started at the military and then came to Claremont, I actually came to the military through Claremont. I had been working, and as Marissa said, and then I was ready to start a family. And just around that time, I got a phone call from a CMC alum whom I had met while I was still a student on campus. I was one of that first class of women, and Jack and Jill Stark were really great about dispelling the concerns amongst the CMC community about how strange these new CMC women were. You know, did we have horns? Did we have 3 eyes? You know, was there a tail coming out the back? And so Jack and Jill invited us to meet alums as often and trustees as often as they could arrange. So it was through one of those introductions that I met a gentleman named Jerry McKaylee. And about 10 years after I graduated, no, more than that, Jerry called me and he said, well, I'm on this board, and the executive director of the association is a CMC graduate, and there's another member, Art Swerdloff, who is a member of the board, so we think it would be really great to, let's stack the board with CMCers, but you'll be our first CMC woman. That was 1994. So 21 years ago, I walked into my first meeting, and I was in my first trimester of pregnancy with my first child. So in the time that I have been on the board of Military Women in Need, I have grown 3 children, one of whom is a full-grown man, 20, and then I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. So that's my story of how I got to Military Women in Need. Why I stayed is for the mission. So I'd like a show of hands now just to sort of get an understanding of where you all are at. I would like you to raise your hand if you have a close relative or family member who has served in any of the conflicts in the Middle East. Raise your hand if you have a close relative or family member who has ever served in the military. Okay. Keep your hands raised if that veteran was a woman. Thank you. Now, a show of hands for those who have been to Arlington Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Okay. Now, the next one's a knowledge question. Who here knows that there is a women's memorial at Arlington Cemetery? Thank you. So these questions are significant. And the reason that they're significant is because only a third of Americans under the age of 30 have a family member who served in the military. 1/3. Ours is an all-volunteer force, and the children of veterans are more than twice as likely to join the armed forces as children of non-veterans. This means that 2/3 of your age group, those of you under 30, have no significant ties to the military lifestyle or the values they represent. That's a big gulf, and I'd like to make sure that you, on the contrary, are informed and connected to our country's armed services. If you were to call society a building, I would say that the military is one of the load-bearing parts, because there is no question that they certainly do bear a load on behalf of the whole rest of this country. So let's talk about women veterans. Women have fought in this country's armed forces since before there was ever a country. But they were never part of the official sanctioned military force until the end of World War II, about 1948. We know that women served in the military before that, but like I said, it wasn't sanctioned by the US government. There was Molly Pitcher, who was a battlefield nurse during the Revolutionary War. Women dressed as men to fight alongside their husbands in the War of 1812 and the Civil War. We know one woman who was a battlefield doctor during the Civil War, was actually captured by the Confederate forces, held as a prisoner of war. There was a prisoner of war exchanged in the middle of the war. She was returned to the Union forces. She then re-enlisted and went right back to the battlefield and served. The point is, from the beginning, American women have fought for their country and have done so for all the same reasons that men have. Love of country, a sense of duty, and mostly the unwillingness to sit on the sidelines and watch while other people did the fighting. It's that same thing, Brian, that had you go after you saw the buildings fall in 9/11. So women became part of the military in 1948, but their numbers were capped, and those numbers were capped for decades. During the Korean War, women were 2% of the fighting force. It got much bigger in Vietnam, 3%. When the draft ended, however, in 1973, and the military became an all-volunteer force, the caps disappeared. So that was 1973. September 1976, that's when I came to campus. Thank you, Jack and Jill. That's when I came to campus. Women came to CMC for the first time. It was also the first time that the military academies ever welcomed women onto their campus. Now, I use the word welcome broadly. They really weren't. It turns out that they had decided to open the academies to women, but that was not a decision that the academies made from their place. It was made by somebody else. And so they really weren't happy with it. This is the difference between being a CMC woman and living through that transition, which was a little awkward, but not terrible, and what happened with these women. There were actually very high-ranking civilian women who were sent on behalf of the government to go visit the military academies to talk to them about how to incorporate women into their lifestyle. One of those women, by the way, was not yet Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. So Sandra Day O'Connor and another friend of mine named the Honorable Maysu Talley. So Justice O'Connor and the Honorable Miss Talley were over at Annapolis, and they've described to me personally their reception as being, as I say, less than welcoming. The last thing that they wanted to do was accommodate women. You can imagine integrating women into the forces, a force that where things like tradition matter a lot. Women weren't part of that tradition. And there were a lot of people who were uncomfortable with opening that. That was how women were welcomed into the academies. That's how women were welcomed into the military. In 1990, 25 years ago, fewer than 4% of all veterans were women, which means that, do the math, 96% were men. If you were the CEO of a company where 96% of your customers were one gender, how much attention would you pay to the other 4%? Women were the exception. But you know, everything changed after 9/11. Everything. When our homeland was attacked, young people, and a very large share of middle-aged folks too, joined the military in droves. For the first time, there was a significant number of women. In fact, today, 12 to 15% of our active duty and reserve forces are women. That's nearly 10%. Now think about this for a minute, and you realize, for the first time in this country's history, there is a critical mass of women veterans. I'm standing here today talking to you about this issue for one simple reason. Women veterans are the most unnoticed, underserved, fastest growing populations in this country, and nobody talks about them. The VA has been unable to keep pace. It isn't news that the VA is a government agency struggling to meet its mission. Facilities are understaffed and overburdened. Priorities change with the pressure of political might and the winds of political change. And if you think it's bad for men, you should hear how much worse it is for women. Now, what makes working with women veterans different? Some of this is pretty elementary. Their medical treatment, their learning and unlearning styles, their life goals, their experiences, their financial needs. There are fewer VA facilities, doctors, resources, and classes for women. Mental health treatment is vastly different for women than it is for men, but programs designed for women are few and far between. The result is that women veterans avoid the VA. And that's a problem, because no matter what you think about the VA, whether they're doing a good job or not, these women need care. So what can you do to level the playing field, and how do you provide women with sufficient care? I can tell you what MWIN did. We continued to focus on our niche, which has always been the widows of veterans and women veterans, and we adapted. MWIN actually started out almost 100 years ago in 1921 when an acre of land near the Westwood VA was donated and bungalow housing for 10 widows was built. 10. As the decades passed, the organization provided this discounted housing to deserving widows and women veterans. So we were very clear. When I joined the board 20 years ago, our business, our social enterprise, was to prevent homelessness. But this enterprise's capital, MWIN's capital, was completely tied up in land and buildings. So when real estate values actually increased, we as a board realized this was the time to sell. The buildings were sold, Our capital was put into investments, and we found that by using and having all that access to capital, we were actually able to help a lot more women than ever before by providing these monthly housing subsidies. It was regular as clockwork. It was a system that worked and an operating model that served the need when our population was women, veterans, and widows of veterans who were 55 and older. But the population of women changed after 9/11. They were younger. Some were single moms with children. So to fit their needs, we realized we needed to change what we were doing. We started a program of, rather than these regular monthly subsidies, what we called emergency subsidies for security deposits, for extra bills after an illness, for moving expenses. And we began a personalized and a holistic resource and referral initiative to guide our women to all the services that they needed. Collaboration has been one of our top strategies as social entrepreneurs. We used collaboration as a strategy when we were an unknown. By collaborating with and associating with larger national agencies, we were perceived to be larger and gained credibility. As we gained credibility, then we gained visibility. We were asked to do more, and we did more. We built relationships with every charity and agency that worked with our population in Los Angeles and throughout the Southern California area. And today, throughout this region, we partner with 35 peer agencies. We send women veterans to them, and they send them to us. These partners range from homeless women's veterans shelters, recovery programs, religious foundations, the VA, Salvation Army, and others. I've talked about our emergency subsidy program. It is one of our most effective tools and probably one of our most distinctives. It is designed to fill the gaps by funding what other agencies don't. See, what most people don't know and what we didn't realize was that nearly every veteran service agency out there is funded through the VA or another government program. HUD, Department of Labor, VA, they all fund these programs. It's simple, really. Getting government grants means one thing. They define what is funded, not you. Every time the VA changes a definition, it changes your program, but not our programs. Amwin has always operated on private funds exclusively, and we consider our funders to be our investors. These are real investors who, like any financial investor in a startup, expects real reporting. They expect to be told of the challenges as well as the successes and the strategies to overcome those challenges. So we engage our funders closely. We worked with Newman's Own. This is the salad company, salad dressing company. Paul Newman was a veteran. He felt that his military experience gave him the ability, the talent, the confidence to go and become the successful actor and human being that he was. So he started this food company with the intent that all of the profits would be spun off into a foundation. Some of that goes to help sick kids. A lot of it goes to help veterans. One of those is they have the Newman's Own Award, which Military Women in Need won in 2011. So here it was 4 years ago. I was at the Pentagon, received the award from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this is a rather prestigious award. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said two things to us that really resonated. One of them was, we won the award because we were the only ones who focused exclusively on women. Let me repeat that. This is a national award. There are hundreds of submissions from veteran service agencies. We were the only ones that focused exclusively on women. The other thing that he said was, ride this while you can, because interest in veterans comes and goes in this country. And right now we're riding a high, but it's not going to last. You watch. a couple years, and it's going to go away. Interestingly, he was wrong. We've actually done studies and shown that giving from foundations and from donors to veterans organizations, to veterans foundations, to veterans period has increased 40% over the last 5 years. So I'm really pleased to say that there has been a real increase in awareness for veterans in this country overall. I want to go back to this thing about government funding. Government funding would create and impose a burden on us. I've talked to other organizations about that burden. The reporting requirements for government grants are incredibly time-consuming. Those grants are based on data that is 12 to 18 months old minimum. You see, another benefit to private funding, flexibility. Here's what I want you to think about. The count of women veterans coming to the VA for PTSD increases. What do? They do a study to determine where, how, and how many. They approve the pilot study, develop the system-wide rules, and roll out the program. You can see 12 to 18 months minimum. Here's what we do. We meet regularly. We convene our peer agencies for collaborative dialogue and real-world solutions in which we are literally asking them, how do you resolve this issue? And the whole room talks. We then download all that information and we distribute it out to them along with contact information. We have created a network among our peer agencies. We survey our women about our services, their needs, if there are new challenges. And then we as a board actually have our staff come to each board meeting every quarter so that we hear directly what the needs are, what the trends are, what's new. Our ability to respond makes us both nimble and efficient. 4 years ago, we took this model, what we do, which is limited funding, this gap funding that I talked about, plus the resource and the referral, and we took it to the County of Los Angeles, Department of Military Affairs. The County of Los Angeles, to its credit, had determined that women were an underserved and at-risk population among veterans, identified the need as a critical goal, and formalized a connection with MWIN. Today, we have a field office in downtown Los Angeles in Bob Hope Patriotic Hall. By partnering with the county for years, recruiting county-associated people to our board, we gained a place at the table and access to Patriotic Hall. And we, in turn, became central to the county's women's program. Today, every woman vet who walks into the County Veterans Building can be referred to MWIN. Dial 211 on your phone to access social services in LA County or Orange County, and women veterans will get referred to MWIN. MWIN serves as an advisor to the county and its key partners on nearly all issues and procedures relating to women veterans. If you consider that Los Angeles County has the largest concentration of veterans in the country, the largest concentration of male veterans, the largest concentration of female veterans, the largest concentration of homeless veterans, then you can realize that our expertise in treating women veterans is probably ahead of federal government programs in every category. This is a thriving public-private partnership. 20 years ago, we owned land and buildings, and we helped 10 women. This year, we spent just over $500,000, and we helped 600 women and children. Throughout the world, microfinance initiatives focus on women because women build communities. Our nation's women's vets are no different. Women vets are among the most proven, able, and deserving population of women that I can imagine. The difference that each woman makes is exponential, not additive. And having served their country, I feel it is my duty to serve them. The opportunity is to take a population that is at risk and to stabilize them, to offer a safety net and a bridge to sustainability. I didn't expect to find myself as an advocate for women veterans, and neither did any of the people who came before me. But for nearly 100 years, someone has led Military Women in Need. Someone has led this organization and spoken up for a rarely seen underserved population. Sandra Day O'Connor did it 40 years ago. I've done it for the last 21 years. I'm standing on her shoulders. We're looking for some strong minds, good hearts, maybe some interns who want to make a difference in the world, and we want to start by making a difference with women veterans. Could that be you? Thank you. Now, I'm told that I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. So, anybody have any questions about anything?
I've got the mic.
Thank you very much for speaking, Meredith. As always, it's great to see you. I did have a question kind of relating Brian's talk with yours about education. I watched a documentary about women and how educating a woman actually does more than educating a man for our GDP. Can you speak a little bit more about your initiatives with educating our women veterans, and if we have any sort of higher rate of education of women veterans to male veterans or vice versa?
That's a really interesting question, and I think there's really two points to that question. One of them is the gender issue, women versus men, and the other one, of course, is the education piece. I don't have any data or background to discuss or compare women veterans education with male veterans education, but I can speak to the difference between supporting women veterans and supporting male veterans, just because it's the same as the difference that most nonprofits find when they're supporting women versus men. Many of our women are single mothers. Now, this is again new ever since we dropped our age restriction. Here's the real situation. If you believe that you are going to lose your home and you have a child, there are very few homeless shelters available for women with children. Even fewer for veteran women that are children. So a woman veteran would rather sleep in her car than go to a homeless shelter. And the reason that she would is because that way she keeps her family intact. And her first priority is always her family. One of the things that we have been able to do, and we have testimonials from this, is by securing housing for these women, what we do is we give them stability. We give them stability and security. And that enables them to then go out and finish their education. One of the women that we helped, in fact, said that because of this, she ended up going back to college, finishing her degree. While she was finishing her degree, by the way, she volunteered with 2 different veterans organizations. She got her degree and is now going back to get her master's in social work so that she can then go back and work with the veterans population. So what we did by providing probably $750, I want you to get that, $750. What an efficient use of money. That's how much our average emergency subsidy is. And what we were able to do with that was give her that kind of security. The other thing is that she knows that we are always available to her, because once a woman veteran has contacted us, she stays in our system, she stays on our rolls. We often go and do home visits, but we are always available for consultation by telephone. And you ask any veteran how easy it is to get an answer from the VA. Yeah. So being able to call Military Women in Need has been a real, it's been a real game changer for women. I don't know if you also noticed, but there are more and more books written by women veterans today. There is more legislation about women in the military today. There are documentaries about women in the military, and there are movies. So the story is getting out there, but I really need your help. We need your help. Thank you very much.